Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Iru Gerard Fernando, and this is Shrink Wrapped. Today we're going to be talking about Wire, Episode 1. And in the opening scene, we see Detective Jimmy McNulty, who's going to be one of the more prominent characters in this show. As you may realize later on, there are tons of characters, and really the character that takes the most precedent is the city of Baltimore. In this scene, Detective McNulty is talking to a witness of a person who got shot and killed. This person's name is called Snot. And it turns out that this Snot individual was playing some craps and took some of the money and tried to run away. And as this witness is describing, this person, Snot, usually does this. He usually is in this game and then he runs away. Usually they beat him up, but this time he got killed. So Jimmy asks this question to him: why'd you let him play? He always steals from you. And this is where it delivers one of the best lines and really encapsulates what the show is gonna be about.
I gotta ask you, if every time Snot Boogie would grab the money and run away, why'd you even let him in the game?
What?
When Snot Boogie always stole the money, why'd you let him play?
Got to. This America, man.
Next, we go into the opening credits. Opening credits change every single season in terms of the musical style that it's played in. However, it's the same song every single time. It's a great montage. The montage always involves all different scenes throughout the series. And so I enjoy just watching it from time to time because I think the song is amazing. And next, they always have a quote that they show at the very beginning of the episode. And again, it's supposed to kind of give the overall message. So in this situation, it's McNulty saying, "when it's not your turn." And a little bit later, we'll find out what that means. When we start off, we get an introduction to Detective Bunk Moreland. He is good friends with Jimmy. They are co-partners. And then we get to see the initial interaction between the drug dealers and the police. In this situation, there is D'Angelo Barksdale, who is on trial for murder. On the stand, there's a person called Gat. We find out later on that he's a maintenance man, and he points out to D'Angelo Barksdale saying that he is the one that did the shooting. A little bit later on, you see Stringer Bell, who is an amazing drawer, by the way. He's in the background and he knows that McNulty's a detective and having a really fun drawing to show him as well. What you might find interesting is McNulty doesn't seem to care all too much. He actually smirks and has a little bit of fun time playing along with Stringer Bell. Stringer, however, realizes that that might be somewhat of an issue. Later on, we see a security guard known as Miss Lyles come in, and it looks like the prosecutor definitely thought that she was going to identify D'Angelo Barksdale as the shooter, but gets a surprise of her lifetime when the security guard changes her story. At which point McNulty walks out of the room telling Stringer, "nicely done." And so he later on goes and tells the detective on that case that, "hey, listen, you just lost your case," and the detective didn't believe him. As McNulty's trying to leave, the Judge Phelan, asks him to come back and asks him, "what's that all about?" And noticing that Jimmy was in that courtroom even though it wasn't his trial. Now Jimmy and Judge Phelan go back, and that's the reason why they have this relationship in the first place. Now the judge wants to know what exactly is going on, and so Jimmy tells all the information that he knows about Avon Barksdale and about the fact that he seems to be having this unknown drug empire which is gone through the noses of all the police department. And so when Phelan asks who's working it, Jimmy says, "yeah, really nobody." And so this catches his eye, and the judge and Jimmy start to work together, and this is kind of how the whole show gets pushed forward, is because of this initial interaction with the judge and McNulty. Basically, we're looking at three different storylines. One is the drug users with Bubbles and Johnny, Avon Barksdale, who is the very top, that is Stringer Bell, who's second command, and then below them are people like Weebay and D'Angelo Barksdale. And the other storyline, we have the police and the politics that go along with that. That's Judge Phelan, Detective McNulty, Major Rawl, Lieutenant Daniels, and the attorney Rhonda Perlman, and about how they all how all their interactions kind of blend in with each other to make the amazing story that is The Wire. The first shot that we get of Bubbles and this person named Johnny. In this, they're trying to run a scam together. They're very crudely cutting up paper that looks like dollars, putting coffee all over it to make it look kind of like money. And at this point, it's clear that Bubbles has more experience than Johnny. He's trying to show him the ropes. He's trying to teach him how to properly hold a heroin habit. And then later on, you can see them using the heroin. They're both nodding out in terms of starting to have the effects go over them. You can start to see them slowly drool a little bit, and you can see him slowly scratch himself, which is another sign of opiate or heroin intoxication. And during this time, as he's watching Johnny shoot up, he's saying, hey, you're shooting and you're using too much right now. And if you can see, they're using a needle, so this is the fashion in which heroin use goes usually from people snorting it or taking it through the nose. And then as the dependence gets higher, people start to inject with the needle because it's that much more potent, going straight to the bloodstream. And so in this scene, Bubbles is telling Johnny, you can't just take it all at the same time or you might overdose and die.
You need to pace that shit, man. Johnny, man, you hear me?
I'm cool.
Nah, man, you gonna fall out, man, slamming shit like that one of these days, boy.
And let's all keep in mind that right now, United States of America is growing through the highest overdose death rate that we have ever seen. The latest numbers were about 70,000 Americans dying every single year from opiate use disorder overdoses. And this scene here, we see that Johnny now is trying to run the scam himself, but is a lot more nervous and a lot less savvy than Bubbles is. And as the fake money is thrown on the floor, Johnny realizes that he's not in a good situation here, tries to book it, at which point Bodie sees him, comes after him. Johnny is knocked down, and then when D comes and they're asking what should we do with him, D takes the $10 that he has and then doesn't say anything, just allowing Bodie, Poot, and everyone else to beat the living crap out of Johnny. The next scene, we see Weebay in the car with D'Angelo. At this point, D'Angelo has gotten off, they're in the car, and D'Angelo is saying, hey, how'd you do that stuff with the security guard to make her change her story? At which point, you hear Weebay turn up the song to Jay-Z Izzo, great song, great production by Kanye West. They get out of the car, at which point Weebay tells him, what's the rule? And then he said, don't talk in the car. So you can just see how careful they are already of potential bugs being in cars. The next scene that we see is in a strip club. And upstairs, you can see the first shot of Avon Barksdale, along with Stringer Bell. And as you can tell, Avon is controlling things on who has to pay in the strip club, showing that he's the one who owns that strip club as well. As D'Angelo comes upstairs, Avon is less than happy to see him and really tells him, hey, why did you kill this person with so many witnesses out there? I don't care that you were scared. You shouldn't have done that. At that point, D'Angelo admitting, yes, I did screw up. And right before leaving, there's a really interesting and important interaction in which Avon kisses D'Angelo's head and says, you're family. That's all that matters. And so you can tell how he runs his organization, and really there's a lot of importance put on the concept of family. And in this next scene, we see Stringer Bell, who is the second in command in the Barksdale operation, tell D that he is no longer in charge of the high rises and in fact has to go to a place called the Pit, which, as you can tell, D'Angelo is not very happy about, but it seems that it was Avon that eventually made this decision to put him there, in a way almost as punishment for what he did in killing that person in the high towers. So, and when going to the pit, we get to see for the first time the landscape in which the kingdom that D'Angelo Barksdale will be commanding. Over there we get some introductions. Some of the other people we meet here are Wallace, Poot, and Bodie. All these people are also running the operations in terms of the dealings of drugs in the pit. So when he gets there, Wallace asks D, hey, did you mess up the count? Meaning, did you mess up how you were counting the money? Is that why you were put here? And in the end, D is like, no, I killed somebody. That's the reason I'm here. Later on, they have a pretty interesting conversation about money after they got scammed by Bubbles, where they had some $10 bills which were photocopied. And Wallace had this great line about saying, hey, Hamilton was never a president, in which D very strongly says, of course he was. How else are you supposed to get on money if you're not a president? Which again kind of shows the lack of understanding in history that might be going on in the society that we have. In the strip club, we see Stringer talking to D, and D having some moral issues with how badly they beat up Johnny. And Stringer said, it doesn't matter how much money was overused, even over $10, it's the message. They gotta show how ruthless that they are and that no one can try scamming them. Otherwise, this is what's gonna happen to you. You're gonna end up in the hospital fighting for your life. And then a little bit later on, as D is frustrated, not getting enough answers from Stringer, one of the strippers comes down and her name is Chardine, but goes by Carla in this one instance. At this point, she's trying to get him to buy her a drink for $20, and he says, hey, I'm not no John, meaning that, oh, I'm not a person looking for a prostitute, and then which Chardine says, I'm not a prostitute. So basically, starting that interaction because the relationship between the two goes much further later on in the season. Next we see Detective Kima Greggs, who's part of the narcotics unit. It's a separate unit than what Jimmy McNulty and Bunk were, which is the homicide unit. Detective Greggs is in the car with one of her informants, and then we get a close-up of both Herc, Detective Herc, and Detective Carver. These two are usually known as the comedic relief throughout the series. They go in guns blazing, they believe in banging heads, and as you can tell, they're a little bit cocky. But it's usually Detective Greggs, and in this instance, she had to come in and take out the second gun, which both Herc and Carv had forgotten about. So you can tell that the reality is Detective Greggs is the superior cop of the three of them. Back in the office, you can see them using a typewriter. Yes, a typewriter. Keep in mind that this show was filmed in the 2000s after the World Trade Centers had fallen. And so it is showing how lacking that the police department is in terms of the technology that they're using. So much so that she's trying to use a whiteout in order to correct her mistakes. So as you can imagine, that takes a lot of time and effort into useless paperwork when they could be working crimes instead. And as Herc and Carver are messing around, they have this excellent line about the war on drugs.
Say is that we are an effective deterrent on the war on drugs when we are on the street.
Fucking motherfuckers up, right?
Indeed.
Boom. Fuck the paperwork, collect bodies, split heads.
Split them wide.
The Western District way.
All right.
You heroic motherfuckers kill me. Fighting the war on drugs, one brutality case at a time.
Girl, you can't even call this shit a war.
Why not?
Wars end. Huh?
And then we get an introduction to Lieutenant Daniels, who comes up to Greggs and asks her about information on Barksdale. At this point, the judge has already gone up to the higher-ups and basically embarrassed everybody because no one knows who Avon Barksdale is. And at that point, Daniels tells Greggs, hey, I'm gonna assign you, you have to write up a report on this. However, there is not even a date of birth for Avon Barksdale. So in this scene, we see that Bunk and McNulty are going to a new case. And at this point, McNulty is asking Bunk, why did you pick up that phone? That wasn't your turn to do it. You're taking on time and work when you don't need to. And this is where that quote from the very beginning comes in for the very first time.
Give a fuck when it ain't your turn to give a fuck.
It ain't even gonna be a murder.
And back in the office is where McNulty talks to his sergeant, Jay Landsman. Pretty funny guy, he has a lot of great quotes, and again, it's all about trying to figure out the hierarchy in this whole thing. So the sergeant oversees the detectives. However, the one who goes above the sergeant is Major Rawls. And as you can tell from this shot, very menacing guy. The dude is not happy. And as you can tell as he sits down, he gives the 2 fingers to McNulty, basically calling him insubordinate, making sure that he knows that he screwed up big time by going to the judge. And in fact, he is totally pissed by this. Again, it kind of shows what really matters in terms of the hierarchy of the police. It's not so much about trying to find out who's killing all these people or that there's a drug empire. It's more about knowing what is going on and not being caught blindsided. Rawls is not happy, and throughout the series, you'll see them butting heads throughout. And at the very end, just like Detective Greggs, McNulty is being told, you have to stay behind. I don't care that it's past your hours of work. You gotta write this report for the deputy ops. So now both Greggs and McNulty are staying behind to write the reports on the same individual, Avon Barksdale.
You see these, McNulty? You see them? These are for you. These are for you for as long as it takes me to get even.
Major, what
No, don't major me, you backstabbing smart-ass piece of shit. What the fuck you doing over at the courthouse anyway? Why the fuck are you talking to some shitbag judge? These are for you, McNulty. This one over here is going up your narrow fucking Irish ass. And this bad boy over here is in your fucking eye.
After Bunk comes back from his investigation, he finds out, lo and behold, it was not a natural death. That was also a murder. And at that point, Bunk asks McNulty what he's still doing there. And at that point is when Bunk can throw back the very same phrase that he used on him about...
There you go. Giving a fuck when it ain't your turn to give a fuck.
Later, Sergeant Jay comes up to McNulty and actually gives him some good piece of advice, telling him if he continues to do this kind of stuff, he's gonna get demoted to a department that he hates. And at this point, we find out that the one place that Jimmy McNulty does not want to go is the Marine unit, because those diesel fumes make him nauseous. This next scene may kind of come off as unimportant, but what we see is the 2 majors. One is Major Forrester, which is coming from the narcotics unit, which is the one that has Daniels and Greggs in it. And then the other one is Major Rawls. They're getting in this elevator together, and instead of discussing anything about the cases and how they can collaborate and try to take this drug empire down, you could just see that the only thing that matters is talking about how Jimmy was insubordinate and to get that man under control. That's the only thing that really seems to matter about these 2 individuals. And next we finally get to meet one of the bigger players that oversees both Major Forrester and Major Rawls, and that is Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Erwin Burrell. And in this scene, he calls in Lieutenant Daniels, again from the narcotics unit, and talks him to watch his back against Jimmy McNulty, saying that, hey, he's the one who actually went and mouthed it off to the judge in the first place. And if you have anything that you need, I will help you as best as possible. However, we don't want this to get complicated. I just want to show the judge, Phelan, that I am doing this because we're political allies. And again, showing that it's more of the politics that matters as opposed to really catching these criminals. So then Jimmy McNulty goes over to the FBI. What's interesting about this scene is that when he goes and he shows his ID to the front desk, they have zero respect for him, still saying that he needs to have an escort by the FBI. And that's when we meet Special Agent Fitzhugh, who goes into the back, and as you can see from this beautiful shot, the FBI is just so much more advanced than the police department. And then he goes in and they just see all the technology. They're watching a live stream wire of a drug raid that was about to happen, of a drug enterprise. And it just goes to show how much technology is really out there. And as we later on find out, this is the technology that is so vital to make this case. But in this scene, Special Agent Fitzhugh is basically saying, you know, people don't care about the war on drugs anymore. After the 2 towers fell, we got the war on terror that really needs to be taking precedent. And so Jimmy has this great line right over here.
Most of the squad's been transferred to counterterrorism. This thing's the last drug case we got pending. I gotta shut it down by the end of the month.
You guys are getting out of drugs?
Yeah, for a while, yeah. We just don't have the manpower to stay anything big. Not since those towers fell.
What, we don't have enough love in our hearts for 2 wars? Joke's on us, huh?
In this scene, we finally get to see the whole team meeting with each other for the very first time. And at this scene, we get to meet Assistant State Attorney Rhonda Perlman, who's gonna be helping form the case for these departments. But later on, as everything just goes out the window, with Jimmy already saying that it's not gonna work if we just go and try to do some street level arrests, we need to have a wiretap in order for this case to really be brought forward. At that point, Lieutenant Daniels is clearly fed up and saying, you need to remember your chain of command. That's what's really important here.
No one does anything at all on the street without me knowing about it first. Chain of command, Detective. That's how we do things down this end of the hall.
And in this scene here, we see McNulty and Bunk drinking together. They're not even really talking so much about the police case. They're talking about the other issues that's going on in Jimmy's life. He gives a little bit of advice to Jimmy on what kind of individual Daniels is. And it says, he's a company man. He doesn't really piss off anybody. So that's the kind of individual you're gonna be working with here. And then we see a scene in which they're now outside. It looks like the drinking did not stop in the bar itself, but now they've come outside, they're drinking near their police car and drinking pretty heavily. Jimmy goes and is urinating on the tracks just as a train is coming towards them. At that point, Jimmy tells Bunk, I'm gonna work this case, meaning he's gonna defy orders. And in that one scene, you can see him flirting with danger just as the train is coming at him. Bunk is getting scared and he leaves just at the right second, but almost in a very careless fashion, which again will be shown a lot more throughout McNulty's storyline. And in this scene, we find out that Detective Greggs is actually a lesbian and lives with her female partner. She is also trying to study to become a lawyer herself, but unfortunately has a lot of late nights because of both her police work and also in trying to study as well. In this one scene, we see her get a phone call in which we later find out that she got a call from Bubbles, and that Bubbles and Greggs used to have a history together. Most likely Bubbles was most likely a confidential informant of Detective Greggs in the past. Bubbles and Greggs meet up. It's in front of Johnny's hospital bed. As we can see, he is totally tubed up. He has so much medical support because they just beat him so badly. And at that point, Bubbles decides to help Detective Greggs. And so now Bunk, who is supposed to be going into work pretty early that morning, is pretty hungover. His sergeant, Jay Landsman, comes and says, hey, you have a new case to work. Bunk says, hey, you know, I'm doing pretty rough over here. The sergeant laughingly, knowingly knows that he's hungover, says, too bad, you gotta do it anyways. Bunk now goes to the crime scene, turns over the witness, turns over the body, and is found to be William Gant, the same person who testified against D'Angelo Barksdale. And in the crowd, who do we see? D'Angelo Barksdale. And he is surprised to see William Gant to be the one that is shot. And at the very last scene, you can see how disturbed he is by the whole interaction. And as the scene ends, there is the song that always finishes off every episode in The Wire. Now, I personally love this song. There's something about it that just shows such a somber reality that has just been shown to us in that episode. So that is episode 1 in a wrap. So I hope you stick with this show. And if you have any other questions, please comment below. I would love it if you could subscribe to this channel and like us. And tell your friends and family about this, because this is, again, the best TV show of all time. I can't say that enough. And hopefully with my explanations, you'll really understand how brilliant it is.